I'm from Sri Lanka, not from India. But I'm pleased to be here today. And thank you, Prateek, for including a Sri Lankan today. I am an editor of a newspaper back home. And I am going to introduce you to, I was about to say I'm the only Sri Lankan in the room, but then I realized one of my fellow panelists is also originally from Sri Lanka. So let me start with him, Dr. Selva Pankaj. We also have Raja Ganapati. And we have Anish. Where does India's next decade of growth come from? I would love to say Sri Lanka, but I was going to start with Dr. Selva, but then I think I'll start with you, Anish. I heard you're going to be the newest member of the Cockroach Janta Party.
You know, I don't know if I'm a member of the Cockroach Janta Party yet or whether they'll accept me, but what I'm sure is I'm definitely part of the young movement that the Cockroach Janta Party has inspired. And where does the future of India lie? It's in those young people, right? I think we're one of the youngest countries in the world. You've got a young population that's eager for growth, for development, for change. And you've got young people in India today who are at the forefront of culture, of art, of cinema, of growing some of the best startups, and who are eager right now to find a space, particularly in the tectonic shift that you're seeing with AI, to effect not an incremental, but an exponential change, right? So we're at a peculiar moment, and many of you here are part of that moment and effecting that change in your own ways, but we're at a peculiar moment where the challenges of yesterday are not the challenges of tomorrow. And if we are to lift millions of Indians out of poverty, if we are to completely radically reimagine what the future of government looks like, what the future of work looks like, what the future of the delivery of social services and health looks like, you've got an opportunity unlike any other. And that opportunity is being driven by the young people, and they're the ones supporting the Cockroach Janta Party. So I'm glad to be counted as one of them.
Do young Indians still believe the system works for them?
You know, you've seen a worrying trend, right? Even with the Cockroach Janta Party, with what you saw in Tamil Nadu, I was campaigning for PTR, who used to be the finance minister of the state for a few days in Madurai, and TVK, which is headed by actor Vijay, sort of swept that election in a landslide victory. And what you're seeing across the board is a disillusionment with established political parties, established structures, but it's not unique to India alone, right? France had their moment with Macron. He completely sidelined both the sort of socialists and the Republicans. Trump, in some ways, was an exception. He sort of sidelined every moderate Republican. In this country, I mean, Reform is an entirely new political party. It's managed to make headway where, thank you very much, where you wouldn't have thought possible for a new party to enter, right? And in a similar way, you're seeing India emerge as the latest sort of flashpoint. Whether these completely anti-institutional structures survive, whether that disillusionment continues, I don't know. I'm a member of a sort of fairly old political party that grew out of the Indian National Congress. So I'm a moderate in that sense in terms of believing not in radical revolutionary change, but incremental change. I think that these parties, once they come to government, will realize that government is the dull, dreary work of fixing leakages and fixing a creaky old house that you've been living in for centuries and not demolishing it and building it anew. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they will end up surprising us entirely. But there is a disillusionment. Whether that translates into a long-term political project that is viable remains to be seen.
Raja, my next question is to you. You've spent years helping build some of India's biggest consumer-facing startups and brands. Is the India growth story still fundamentally a consumer story?
Yeah, I mean, it's in my biased interest to say yes. I've kind of dedicated my life and my career to doing this. But I think the answer is quite simple, and just taking off from what Anish just spoke about. I think there is such a powerful movement of young people in India. Just it drives. If I look at it from the lens of consumption, if I look at it from the lens of, if I look at it from the lens of consumer companies, a lot of that consumption pattern is changing, and I would actually say that legacy companies are not recognizing that change, and that is the reason why so many new age startups are coming up. I mean, just look at the numbers, right? 377 million Gen Z population in India. That's bigger than the population of the United States. I think if I remember right, 500 million people below 25. These are incredible numbers, and these consumers are driving change in the way they expect companies to build and behave. I think for too long, at least when I was young, decades and decades ago, I think we were satisfied with the status quo. And the young people in India are buying very differently. They're more discerning, they're more conscious, they're concerned about health, they're concerned about ingredients. Every young person knows the back of the pack. They are not getting influenced by celebrity advertising. They want to know more about the company, the founders. They're concerned about ethics and values. I think chalta hai doesn't work for them at all. And I think that's driving change, that's creating a new set of consumer brands, new set of startups. And we love it. I mean, at least for me, I feel like, I have seen a generational shift in the way brands are being built in India. Capital is reflecting that. So if you see, I think we see the M&A transactions, almost everybody from Unilever to Marico to ITC to Dabur has purchased something in the last 5 years. I think everybody recognizes this. There is a new consumer in India. That new consumer is more demanding, more discerning, more conscious, more caring. And I think there is a new breed of companies and founders who are building for this. So yes, there is a huge shift in consumption. And I think a few years back when I left Sequoia Capital to start Spring, a very prominent VC, I won't name him, said, why would you want to do this? The Amazon of India is Amazon, the Zara of India is Zara, and so on. That's no longer true. The Amazon of India is not Amazon. The Zara of India is no longer going to be Zara. And this is stunning. When I started in marketing 30 years back, we would hide India origin on the products that we would sell. I'm ashamed to say that today. But we would hide it because the Indian consumer was looking westwards, especially in FMCG, in fashion, in lifestyle. That's gone. Indians love to consume Indian brands, especially the youth. They love to buy from Indian founders. They love to engage with them. We are investors in this young cosmetics brand called Faye, F-A-E. A very young brand. I happened to be in a mall where the founder launched a new product. And she was mobbed. She was mobbed just like a Bollywood celebrity would be mobbed. Because people are super excited about what these founders are building, how they're going about it. So to me, the answer is a big yes. I'm super excited by the consumption economy. I think that's what's going to drive India into the future. And a lot of that is going to be driven by young people.
Thank you. And leaving the best for last, my fellow Sri Lankan. Yes. Your own story, arriving in the UK from Sri Lanka with very little and building a global organization, reflects the power of mobility and aspiration. Do you think India today is still creating enough pathways for upward mobility?
Thank you. Yeah, as you said, I was 19 when I came to UK. I was a student, and then subsequently, due to the situation, then I was a refugee. So India came to us because I grew up with Indians. I was in Wembley, and then they happily chopped my name to Pankaj Bhai and made me a Gujarati. So that was my start in Wembley, and growing up with them. So I understood the culture, and I understood we got a lot of friends here, and it's the real Indian business side came during the COVID. So we entered India. We're in Mumbai. We got educational investments there. I think for me, it's that aspiration that you mentioned, and we shuttle between sort of in the US as well. And when you go and see what happens in Silicon Valley and what happens in California, and then the leadership, not just the top, not the Sundar Pichais and the world and Satya Nadalas. If you even come down, the amount of talents and the amount what they are doing and learning is amazing. But what the Indians have is, which sadly the country that I was born did not have, that patriotism, that we are all one Indians, and when you say Jai Hind, you mean it, and then when the national anthem goes, you feel it. I think that is so powerful, and I think that happens in the US, and then you could see what happened. They put the hand up like they were right, and I think that belonging, that hundreds of languages are spoken, but still it's one country, and I think that unity. And I sometimes feel it comes from where it's all started. We are in education, and a lot of our research, it comes down on that basis of founding that independent India. That non-violence by Mahatma Gandhi has got a lot to say for that. And I think when you create something with that proper values and non-violence, and then they were challenging the biggest powerhouse at the time, but he always had that non-violence. And that will really bring great results for India. And so the whole idea of India is really exciting, and we love to spend time in Mumbai, where both of you come from. And obviously, Tamil Nadu, we speak the language, so we just enjoy that as well.
Thank you. Anish, I'm going to come back to you. You're one of the youngest voices in mainstream Indian politics. Does Indian politics today genuinely understand young people, or mainly just market to them?
A very good question. To put it very bluntly, I would not have been able to be an Indian politician 10 years ago, right? I don't come from a political family. My father's a tax consultant, very boring work. I did not sort of start working in a political party as a sort of grassroots party worker. I began as a volunteer working on knocking doors for an election campaign. I'm openly gay. That would have been impossible to sort of have as an identity 10 years ago and work in mainstream politics. And I've been appointed as national spokesperson at the age of 27, right? Which would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. The reality is that Indian politics today has to confront that young people are making up the sort of voter base. Indian politics today has to confront that young people are determining voting outcomes, not just in cities, but across the country, right? And young people today are not willing to sort of wait for positions or to be put on a pedestal or to sort of not have power in their hands, when clearly it is the power of young people that older politicians seek to secure, right? So regardless of whether political parties like it or not, regardless of whether political parties want to divest that power or not, they are having to divest that power. And that's what you're seeing across the board. Young people are involved in every single political party in very important positions of power. The fact that social media today has transformed how you run a campaign, how you reach out to people, has seen younger people be more relevant than ever before. I mean, you don't need to pay lakhs of rupees for a rally anymore because nobody's showing up.
We saw that with Vijay's campaign.
Yeah, with Vijay's campaign. Vijay held 4 rallies. Chief Minister M.K. Stalin held those many rallies in a single day. This man held those many rallies in the entire election campaign, right? This was a digital forward campaign. You saw that with Zoran, right? You saw that with Rob Jetten right now in the Netherlands. So we're living, as Yuval Noah Harari has told us, in a blended sort of digital and real world. And political parties are having to confront that. I think where they fail, though, and what they don't acknowledge, is that newer structures need to be created to ensure that younger people get tickets to contest elections, younger people get given sort of significant ministries and portfolios when they do win elections, and acknowledging that it's not just young people who come from political families who can win sort of elections in their home constituencies, but rather young people who have built connections in the communities that they're a part of, who are Instagram influencers in their neighborhoods, who are going to become the politicians of tomorrow. And Vijay realized that, and his party did very well. I think the others will catch up, because if they don't, they lose.
But do you think young people are capable of raising the required funding?
You know, and campaign finance in India, for those of you who might be familiar with it, is a controversial sort of topic, right?
Yeah,
It is
to be honest.
big money. Sometimes when I see news channels in the UK talk about corruption in this country, I have to laugh, because it seems like largest donor, £6 million, the BMC corporator election. But you know, and that has been a consistent challenge, right? But where is the need for money coming from? You have to understand this infrastructurally. When I have a constituency for a member of parliament that is 3 million people, it is fundamentally impossible to reach out to so many people without money. I need hoardings, I need advertising on television, I need print advertising, I need like people on the ground in every single district, and that's where you need the money, right? It's not going into expenses that are avoidable. With social media, the Cockroach Janta Party is a great example, and with the sort of advent of AI, you're creating political communication that required teams of hundreds of people with a sort of Claude project, right? It's made elections cheaper than they were before. Vijay spent less money than his competitors. And to some extent, and this is the great part about the work that people like Raja have been doing and getting money into the country and getting all of these brands to succeed, India is wealthier than it was before, right? You can no longer give somebody 1,000 rupees for a vote and expect that they're going to vote for you. In fact, if Tamil Nadu shows us anything, they'll take 1,000 rupees from both sides and still vote for the sort of candidate they wanted to vote for. So, in some ways, money power is reducing. We're going to have to come up with sustainable campaign finance reforms to ensure that younger people can raise the money required. But one of the other good things that this government has done is it's made really the task of raising money as a political party very easy. And so a new political party that gets created will have to sort of play by the same rules that the BJP plays by, which means they'll be able to raise money the same way that the BJP does.
Any comments, Raja? I can
No,
see.
not on the. I mean, I'll leave the politics to the smarter guy in the panel. But I actually wanted to answer that from a perspective of, can young people in business raise money? I think that's an important question as well, because raising capital is an integral part of scaling. And I speak from my own experience. I mean, I've been in the venture space for the last 18 years, I think, 18 to 19 years. And I have seen a dramatic shift take place in younger people entering businesses and being able to raise money. And I'll give you one example from our own portfolio. 2 years back, we met these two girls, 23-year-olds. They just completed their undergrad. I think they were 23 and 22, sisters. And they wanted to start an athleisure brand. They just launched an athleisure brand, early days. We invested at that point of time. There's a brand called Kava, C-A-V-A. And if I speak about Kava in any room in India, the young people start smiling, because all young people know this brand today. 2 years back, no VC wanted to meet them, because it was, hey, how do you invest behind 23-year-old girls who've never built business? Because the fundamental thinking in VCs, a little bit of what Anish described in politics, you need gray hair. You need to have built a business before. But I think there are a new set of rules today. If you're building an athleisure brand in India, you don't need gray hair. You need the ability to connect with Gen Z. You need to understand the pulse of the youth. You need to be able to build social media platforms and campaigns. You need to be able to use new age platforms and build campaigns. Now, young folks live on social media, something that I think people of my generation will never understand. For them, it's second nature. You know, we have learned how to use these platforms. Young people have grown up on these platforms. It comes intuitively to them, comes instinctively to them. It's like my 24-year-old daughter, who every time I post something says, it's so cringe. Like, why can't you just get off these platforms? She refuses to follow me anywhere. Like, if I tag her, she gets so annoyed with me. She's like, please, can you just stay off these platforms? And I think she has vacated every platform that I've entered. So if I get into Facebook, she vanished. And then the day I found Instagram, she's like, oh no, please. And she uses Snapchat and God knows what, knowing that I can't even figure those apps out. So I just feel there is a new breed of young people, and if you're building for fashion, lifestyle, new age brands, you need to have new age thinking. So I somehow feel there has to be a paradigm shift in the way you look at young people, the way you look at consumption, the way you look at brand building, and I'm only speaking about my area of focus. And hence these two girls today have now built an interesting business. They do 6 crores of revenue a month. They've opened their first store in Bangalore. They've raised 40 crores of funding from VCs. And the one question I keep getting asked is, how did you have the courage to back two 23-year-old girls at the point of time that they raised? But I think that question will not be asked 5 years and 10 years later. The new brands of India will be built by young people. So I just found your question interesting from a brand perspective as well.
I wanted to continue on that. What separates the Indian companies that could become genuinely global from those that remain domestically successful?
Yeah, so I think this question has multiple layers in it. First, you must remember that India is a very, very large market. You can become a very large company not having to go outside India. You know, I mean, it's not easy to sell outside India. It's not easy to sell in the UK. It's not easy to sell in the US if you come from India. There are regulations to worry about. You have to think about new packaging. You have to think about product. You have to get approvals in place. And sometimes a young company does not have the mind space and the bandwidth and the resources to be able to cope with all that. So first answer to that is India is a very large market. You can build a very large business just selling in India. And again, I'll give you one example of that. Last year, we invested in this company called Sri Ananda's. How many of you familiar with the south of India? Okay. So this is a sweets and savories company and also has restaurants. When we met them a year back, and I'm speaking INR, so I'm hoping that folks are reasonably comfortable. It was a 250 crore business, 12 restaurants, 18 sweet shops, 1 bakery, entirely in Coimbatore, just one town. They had not even opened a highway stall. This was today they have started expanding, post-raising around. They're 400 crores after 1 year. They've opened in Chennai. They're opening in newer markets today, all in Tamil Nadu. In our opinion, this company can become a 1,000 crore company, $100 million. IPO in India, with just one state. And that's the depth of some of these markets. So this company doesn't need to do exports. Now, can they benefit from exports? Of course they can. You know? So my view is, first answer is India is a very large market. You can build very large businesses and very profitable businesses just building for India. And the second answer is, we are starting to see a lot of interest, especially in the diaspora. I think the Indian diaspora has become very significant in UK, in US, in Europe. And I feel that many of these products, my personal guidance would be, before you start building for the world, first build for India, build for the Indian diaspora, and then you can worry about the world. And I think just building for the Indian diaspora itself will actually make you a very valuable business. This is maybe a slightly conservative view, but I feel there's enough opportunity between India and the diaspora before you take on the world.
I agree. The global Indian diaspora contributes $1.2 trillion to the global economy annually. Yeah. Why look anywhere else? On to you, Selva. As someone who works across London, Dubai, India, and global markets, what does India have today that the rest of the world may still be underestimating?
I think that's what we heard from yourself. And I think, we entered India about 5 years ago, and then we've been in the UK, our business, 25 years. And I think the amount of growth what you can have in the next 10 years for us, it is absolutely phenomenal, like that Coimbatore idea or like the Chennai idea. And I think sometimes we can't even have that. We are in education. So we are in higher ed in the UK and the US, and then schools in Dubai. And there are limitations for us. But if you look at India, on the other hand, is massive, given the age group you all were saying, given the willingness to have a change in mindset. And when you have those students, when you go and teach them there, or when you see them there, that's something different. And I see that a lot in Silicon Valley. And it's nothing to do with Silicon Valley. It's nothing to do with any air in the Silicon Valley. It's the people, it's the culture, it's the vibration, it's the way that encounter issues. And then the questions they ask when you meet those students, they are hungry. But they are also, I hear this idea of this ethical behavior is coming over and over again. So those ideas of what we have seen 25, 30 years or whatever, I think it's all changing. I think they're well-spoken, they're well-studied, they're well-researched. So there are the opportunities, absolutely. And I was just talking to our team. We have a campus in Pavey, in Hiranandani. Complex starting this month. And the guys and their expectations is probably it'll take 15 years for us to achieve them in the UK. They probably do that in 5. This is possible. People is there, capital is there, interest is there. So for us, I think if anyone underestimates India, perhaps they need to go and visit India. And I think on the basis their life started in 1947, and they haven't even got the 100 years yet. And that aspiration of 2047, that aspiration of got to make something by 2047 is very contagious. And when you talk to people, they feel it, as I said. And I think in that process, companies like us in the UK or US, it's a dream to be in India. And then you got to culturally understand. It's not for everyone. Given that we come from the culture, you enjoy it. So that's what I will just say. So I think it's just to answer your question, I think people should explore it. I think India has got a lot to offer. And then our focus is going to be a lot in India in the next 10 years.
Thank you. Anish, India's politics increasingly celebrates entrepreneurship and wealth creation. But do you think the country has become uncomfortable talking about inequality?
Absolutely. And I think the sort of slightly sobering perspective to a lot of the numbers we've shared here right now is that we are witnessing a moment of profound inequality in the country, right? Your unemployment rate has climbed to the highest it has in recent times at 15.2%. Unemployment rate for young women is at 18.7%, the highest it's been in over a decade, right? You're witnessing inflow of capital, but that's also slowing down. Foreign institutional investors are pulling out as of March 2026. In that month alone, 1 lakh crore rupees. Foreign portfolio investors have the lowest stake in Indian equities that they have had in 14 years, right? So this sort of growth story that has been created is one that is at risk of collapse as well, if not managed correctly. At the same time, you have an aspiration that is being matched by a lack of jobs, right? People are graduating with degrees, and you're doing some incredible work in AI training, but unfortunately, a lot of people getting degrees right now, by the time they graduate, have degrees that are not worth the paper they're printed on. And the only employment they can find after doing a sort of engineering degree from a private college in the middle of nowhere that asks them for high fees for a private education is an Ola delivery sort of driver or a Swiggy delivery driver, right? And a gig worker with no protections. The same young people and the same people in that young age group that are building India's next big companies are also the same young people on the sides of the streets lynching Muslims on suspicion of carrying beef, right? That is also Gen Z. So acknowledging that this sort of rosy picture that we're painting for ourselves comes with seriously flawed implications. The collapse of a welfare state, the collapse of public education, the collapse of social security measures, right? 40 crore Indians are one sort of medical bill away from bankruptcy, right? That profound inequality requires a political commitment to address that inequality. And we have the tools now, right? We have ways of addressing that inequality in ways that were not possible before. It was fundamentally impossible before to provide quality education to the very last mile. With AI, can that be made possible? It was impossible 20 years ago to get quality diagnostics at a village in sort of Maharashtra that did not have anything beyond an X-ray machine. You now do have the possibility of engaging in sort of diagnostic measures that can provide those sort of accesses in more ways than one. And young people need those sort of guardrails. As we construct 13,000 crore rupee bridges connecting parts of Mumbai, if we don't collect and sort of build public housing, where are young people who today cannot even dream of affording a home in a city like Mumbai going to go? You know, what is going to happen to the sort of families they want to create, the lives they want to build? These are serious questions that we as the opposition push the government to answer, not only from the perspective of sort of arguing for argument's sake, but also from a fundamental understanding that the same kind of young energy that you see right now that can propel a country forward can also wreak unspeakable havoc if it sort of acknowledges and sees that there are some people who have so much and others who have so little. And we focused on inequality a lot. We focused on our Gini coefficient in the past a lot. I fear we're not focusing on it enough, and that'll come back to bite us in the long run.
Do you think policymakers are taking the threat of AI seriously?
I think so. We have the India AI mission. I think we have a sort of commitment to AI. I don't think we have the expertise. I think that's where we really need to ramp up the sort of global collaborations that we need on the AI front, on AI in education, on AI in skilling. We also need to concretely understand the impact of AI on jobs. Can we see this as an opportunity to expand our services sector? Somebody like Raghuram Rajan has made a fairly convincing argument that Make in India is a failed project because India doesn't need to focus on manufacturing, because unlike Bangladesh or Vietnam, we don't have the labor workforce that is going to be able to deliver upon the kinds of working hours and standards, or rather lack of standards, that these countries offer, and that instead India should be focusing on a services economy. These are difficult questions, right? They decide the trajectory of your economy in decades to come. I think AI can be a great enabler of progress. I think AI in the long run can provide more jobs to India than take away jobs from India. But it can also take away some of the most important advantages India has had. Our entire call center industry was built upon the sort of premise that Indians speak English and can therefore speak to the world. People don't need to speak in English anymore, right? They can speak into a sort of AI model in whatever language they're comfortable in thinking in, and the model can allow them to communicate across linguistic barriers. Can that be an opportunity? Yes, we only thought that English-speaking Indians had the ability to progress in India so far. Maybe somebody who thinks smarter in Hindi or Tamil or Marathi can now gain access to those opportunities. But it needs a lot more funding, and it needs rational funding. We've got a semiconductor mission that's decades behind sort of missions in the US and China. We've got priorities that are not logical given the state of sort of affairs and the place we are in that AI race. And I think we need to bring in the smartest minds in the world, perhaps some of the folks from the DeepMind offices here in London, and really have these conversations. I think the India AI Summit was a step in the right direction. I worry that clouded with bureaucracy, it achieved more pomp and fanfare than it did any real solutions.
Taking on from the inequality question, India's middle class has become more aspirational, premium, and digitally native. But at the same time, like he rightfully pointed out, inequality is widening. Are brands now being forced to build for two different Indians?
So I think that's I would say that brands are now building for a new India versus a different India. That's my take and my experience. Like I said, I think, look, there is a reality of India from a price-value equation perspective, and I'm speaking from a consumption lens. I'm speaking from a ability to buy lens, right? And I think the same products that sometimes come in by multinational companies from US and UK sell for a few cents in India, right? Compared to what they sell in the US and the UK. But that's a reality of the market. At the mass end of the market, you will have to be governed by what people can afford. And there are certain ceilings. For example, in India, we call it the 5 rupee ceiling and the 10 rupee ceiling. So you cannot cross in many, many different product categories. You can't cross a 10 rupee ceiling or a 5 rupee ceiling, which is, I mean, these numbers look ridiculous from a global perspective, right? So I think there are companies that are building for mass of India, and they are governed by the price equations that exist, and that can't be changed overnight. The second point is, however, there is a growing, new, discerning, more conscious consumer with the discretionary income to actually afford better products. I mean, you cannot say, hey, why are you consuming non-organic products if you cannot provide those products at an accessible and affordable price point? So I feel there's no point being sanctimonious about it. I think there is a mass end of the market which is driven by price. That's the reality, and you have to build for that. But there is a growing, this segment, the new India did not exist 10 years back. There is a growing segment which is discerning, more conscious, obviously a smaller smaller volume sized, but ability to pay more, willingness to pay more, with the discretionary income to back that. And that's the India that I think many of the brands I work with are building for. This is not a cultural commentary. This is how the reality plays out. And I think everybody chooses their spot. Unilever spends, Hindustan Unilever targets the mass, provides product that works for them at their price points, but acquires brands from people like us because they also want to target the new India, right? So that's the second point. Third, by now you would have realized, if you haven't, that I'm extremely optimistic and highly bullish on India. And so that's no surprise. But I also believe that there is a tipping point coming in India. I think once the GDP crosses that very mythical $2,500 per capita figure, which is not very far off in India, I think once that happens, I do feel that you will see the shift quite dramatic in terms of consumption. That's exactly what happened in China. And I see no reason to believe that India is not going to be the same. We are seeing signs of that in the kind of new age brands being built, in the way consumption patterns are changing. We have 4 large corporates who are invested in our funds from their balance sheet. And I think about that, right? Godrej, Cipla, Manipal, and Imami have all invested from their balance sheet into our fund. And you must ask why. Why have these 4 corporates chosen to invest what is to them insignificant amounts of money compared to their balance sheet, but for them a strategic value because they are tracking what's happening in New India? One of the legacy companies, I can't find a better word for it, so I didn't mean that to be derogatory, but companies that have existed for years, done well. The CEOs told me, he said, I can see the disruption coming, I just don't know when and where. You know, so they all want to keep an eye on this part of the market. They know that these new brands are breaking out. And I do believe that all of them will coexist. I think the 5 rupee, 10 rupee ceiling on products, which is a few cents, that's not going to go away, even in the next decade. I think those ceilings will exist. But at least consumers today will have the choice to buy products at different price points, satisfying different aspirations, different ambitions. And I think that's perfectly okay. I see no dichotomy in this because that's the reality of India. We are a very large population, 1.5 billion people. We are never lonely at any point of time in our lives. And that's the reality of the country. And we have to enjoy that reality. We have to experience it. And I think we have to make our choice on where we want to build, but the choices exist today, unlike a decade back. And that's what gives me the excitement and the optimism to build in India.
I'm curious to ask you about AI and education. How should India rethink higher education and skills training for an economy where traditional graduate pathways may no longer exist?
I think just before I answer that, just some observations and agreement on that. I think one of the mistakes sometimes we make is we look at the economic policies, growth policies, always from a sort of a Western viewpoint or another viewpoint. But the fundamentals of India is very different. A country which is only 77 years old, with the 1.4 billion people or 1.5 billion people, with that sort of the variety of languages and cultures and so on. So then sometimes we try to answer and solve a problem what worked in another jurisdiction. And I think when you try and do that, maybe it's India got to be unique in its own way. And that's what I think they are doing and what you are hearing from. You don't need to go outside when you have this thing. So in that context, if you then go into the higher ed and what AI is, I think, again, there's a lot of misunderstanding about sort of what is AI and whether it's in Silicon Valley or wherever. I think it's effectively, this is a super intelligent tool which is there, far more capable than humans. They are good at something, we are good at something, and we need to figure out in our education system what we are good at. And there are these intuition, the will, and we thought memory only belongs to us, and we thought that animals didn't have memory, but there is somebody else called those AI agents have far bigger memory than us. So memory is not just belongs to humans anymore. But there are still skills that all bits belongs to us. The whole neurochemicals, the neurology, and there is still there. So what we really believe in these AIs is not just about talking about AI. How do we live with AI? So in Stanford, where I spend a bit of time now, and they talk about AI plus our research is NI, natural intelligence. How do you augment that? Is intelligent augmentation. How do we learn to live with these super intelligent machines? We always used to say, in the room, if you are the most smartest person, it's a problem. In a management context, they will say, if you are the smartest person, then you are in the wrong room. You need to be in the room where other people are smarter than you so you can learn. I think we have the great opportunity now. The Claude or vibe codings or all of these new things what's coming through, we are far smarter, but we are refusing to accept they are smarter. So what we wished for has arrived. But as humans, we'll have to humble ourselves and say, we are creating it, but they can perform better than us. And then that's the education. So I don't think there's anything fundamental we need to change in my mind. It's an evolution, it's not a revolution. I don't think anything's going to change overnight. But the human acceptance and the human mindset will change. And guess what? As you said, the Gen Zs, they grew up with that. And we are adopting to it. And when you have that 500 million people or 600, 700 million people will quickly have the adaptation against a Western model, or England is, we are a very small country. It's got 60 million people, and it's so we can't compare it. So therefore, one size fit all. What works in California is going to work in India. What works in the UK, what can we learn from that? I think we've got to look at India from its very different perspective and go back to the basics and really grasping it. And that's what the acceleration is going to come. I think you're absolutely right. And once they go through the next threshold, I think it's very difficult to stop. The 2047, every Indian is dreaming for, I think they'll smash it. And AI will accelerate them. How I answered you?
Yes, you did. I got a bit distracted because they just told us we have 10 minutes more. Sorry. I'm going to put this question to all three of you. Has India become too dependent on a handful of large conglomerates and billionaire-led growth?
Contrary to what you might expect from an opposition leader, I don't think so. I think the narrative of monopolistic and oligopolistic control in India is blown way out of proportion. The bulk of India's growth is coming from the MSME sector, it's coming from small businesses, it's coming from small entrepreneurs, and they're the ones driving this story. Are there concerns around monopolistic growth, around the corruption it enables, around mechanisms for accountability that need to be put in place? Absolutely. But to mistake those demands for accountability as a sort of fundamental misreading of India's growth story would also be the opposition's folly. So despite everything that is happening, I think the India growth story remains diverse. It remains multi-regional. It remains one that is powered not just by certain identities or interest groups. And that's perhaps what makes it more resilient. And that's also what will allow it to succeed in 2047, despite this government rather than because of it.
Selva, your thoughts on this?
I don't sort of understand from the perspective of politics. I don't know a lot. But I think, again, coming back to that size of, that big, I mean, if you really start thinking about the US, so you have got multiple states and each state is growing. I think the same thing can happen in India. I think it's already there, the 1.4 billion people. I think it's at 29, all right, 29 states. And, if each one of them start thinking like that, and it's 29 countries got together and driving it, and they have the passion for their language, for their culture, and all the rest of it. So therefore, I think there is an opportunity for everyone. I think we've got to be a little bit patient. The country is only 77 years old. You can't solve all the problem in 77 years when you have 1.4 billion people with different literacy rates and so on. The strategies are different. And therefore, I think it's very difficult to compare. Like in Dubai is a great example. So Dubai did in 200 years, but such a small country. So therefore, I think it's so unique. And I'm sure the leadership, particularly the youngsters, I think they'll shape it. I think we all need to be there, at least to experience the growth and enjoy the growth whilst AI is doing, and where India will be smashing. So yeah, we like to make a small part and contribution to that. That's all I would say.
Yeah, I think India's, if you're worried about size and monopolies, I think you should be looking at the West, to be honest. I don't think you need to worry about India at all. I'm really surprised that people are not more worried about the trillion-dollar companies that are getting built, which have enormous influence over how we think, how we behave. They have access to our data. I think India is, if there are few companies in India that have become big, I think that's least of our worries, to be honest. And I would say, looking at India, I think the diversity of India, and that's my panelists answered it in the same way. The diversity of India, the depth of India will not allow you to create those kind of monopolies. And in fact, I agree that actually the number of MSMEs and the number of small companies that are coming up, the power they have, a Kirana store that cannot be uprooted, whatever you do, because they become so integral part of the neighborhood. That's so uniquely India. The kind of companies that we have invested in can't exist outside the country simply because of the way they serve the needs of the Indian population. To me, I think India is super diverse from a business environment. I see no risks of large companies. Having said that, I think there are certain sectors where you need size. For example, if you have to win an infrastructure project, you can't compete unless you meet certain ground rules of how long you've been in operation, what is your size, how much capital do you have. So you can't, as an upstart, come in and build an energy company in any sector, in any country in the world. Forget India. So I think size does dictate. Unfortunately, bigger companies become big in certain categories like infra. And I think that's just what has happened. But from a fundamental question perspective, I think I would not be worried at all. In fact, I know that the larger companies in India are super worried about the upstarts. They're super worried about the emerging companies in a good way. I already spoke about how corporates are interested in young emerging companies. I think that's a good thing to happen. I think these young folks, the new founders, the new business owners are keeping the legacy companies on their toes, and that's a good thing. So I completely disagree with the notion that there's any kind of monopoly.
Yeah, I think I would probably say another observation is, if you look at the US, the future is the whole idea of the sovereign LLMs, something India should think about. I think the future with AI is, if you look at the ownership-based LLM models, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic and what's coming through. And China is doing that, on the other hand, on an open source, whether it is DeepSeek. But India is not doing that. I think that's where the opposite. So you need a big player to come and have that large language models, or now they call it the large world models, because otherwise with this 1.4, if you're depending on OpenAI or the future of those companies in the US. So is the opposite needs to happen. That got to be a big player, needs to come to India and become the large language model. And otherwise, there's a big sovereign risk there, because somebody will pull the fingers, and then you're in the mercy of America or China. At the moment, I don't think India has that. And I'm sure the bigger the India become, somebody will say, why can't we create the next OpenAI or Open India and build a large language model on whether it is proprietary, which the Americans are doing, but the Chinese are doing the opposite. They are doing OpenAI because as part of the ability to control the belt and whatever they call it. So I think India is stuck in between. So I would probably argue very much like you, I think you need a big, massive, dominating Indian company to come and take control of LLM and play with Sam Altman.
Since we're running out of time, I'd like to end with a prediction from each of you. In 2036, what will we say was the single biggest decision or missed opportunity that shaped India's economic future? Would you like to start, Anish? One prediction.
I think the decision is upon us. I think any decision taken today on energy security, on diversifying household energy consumption away from LNG towards electrification, any decision taken on large-scale production of electricity with nuclear or wind or other renewable sources, and any decision taken despite the allure of continuing with coal as our sort of base energy supply is going to fundamentally define how we look back to 2026 and 2036. We've been lucky in some ways to have a global energy crisis right now that's shaken us out of our slumber. I think we need to take advantage of it and act decisively now.
Selva, any predictions?
Thank you. I would still say the sovereign LLMs will be a biggest challenge for India, given the players are Americans and Chinese. I think there is not enough activity there on large language model and large world models and all the rest of it. I think if India does that, I think we're all in the same pitch, from a cricket analogy. And I'm sure some smart guy will make it happen, or some smart lady will make it happen.
So I'm going to take a slightly contrarian view on that question itself. I actually feel, and I'm going to use a cultural Indian view to answer that. I think Indians have a unique way of adapting. I think we adapt, we evolve much better than most other cultural populations. And I believe that ability is what will determine, that is what has led to how we have behaved and evolved in the last 77 years. And that is how we will manage the next 10. For example, the advent of AI. I am one of the few people who are completely fearless on how India will react to AI, on how the changing environment on AI. In fact, I actually feel, let the fools rush. Please burn all the money in the world that you have to burn, because that's what you do well, and we will figure it out with time. I am actually of the belief that we will adapt well. So to come back to your question, I think no single decision will have any significant impact on how India looks in 2037. I think India is not moved by any single black swan event or any single large-scale decision. I think we will find a way to adapt nevertheless. That's my view.
I was going to open the floor for questions, but I've just been told that we need to exit the stage. We've run out of time. But thank you very much.